Welcome to Perfectionists Anonymous, a podcast-style channel dedicated to unraveling the myth of perfectionist living. I'm your host, Caitlin, and I'm a recovering perfectionist. I invite you to sit down, relax, and hang out with me, your supportive friend, who knows how difficult perfectionism can be and who wants to find a better way. Thank you for joining me today. The cause of our despair is the sentences at the back of our minds, all of which contain the word should. Abhedev, the influencer, speed must have a limit. Greetings, fellow perfectionists, and welcome to today's episode. I hope that you are all doing well. As a quick update, I wanted to share that I've been doing some thinking and developing for Perfectionists Anonymous. And at this time, I have decided that rather than doing a pure podcast format, I wanted to explore more of what a YouTube podcast-style format could look like. For those who don't know, I do have another YouTube channel called Wizard Kitten, where I primarily play and analyze the Nancy Drew games as well as The Sims 4, with a wonderful community of fellow detectives. I'm therefore more comfortable with the YouTube format at this time and wanted to try and build something else new and exciting on this platform. I hope you will join me as we continue this venture. And now, into the meat of today's episode. If you are anything like me and the constant critical messaging of society gets burned into your brain like a tattoo, then you are probably very familiar with one of the most all-encompassing and damaging words in the English language: should. I say this because no one is immune from the wounds that should can inflict. Like an invasive weed, the word should needles its way into thoughts and feelings that we sometimes don't even know that we have, and clings to our brains for dear life, almost never relinquishing its control. This may sound dramatic, but I truly believe it to be true. We all, and anyone with perfectionistic or people-pleasing tendencies in particular, constantly weaponize the word should against ourselves and others. Before we dig too deep, where did the word should even come from? Should is an auxiliary verb, meaning that it doesn't stand on its own, but rather is attached to another verb in order to indicate a condition, a perceived obligation, a function, an expectation, and so on. The fact that we sometimes interpret it as a verb all on its own says something about its power. But should always goes with another verb, at least in English, i.e., I should run, he should be more careful, she should be more generous, etc. The English language has a host of other auxiliary verbs that are closely related to should, would, could, and may, for example. These other auxiliary verbs can be rather damaging as well, but at least for me, there's something less painful about saying, well, I would go to the party, but I just have so many other things to do, instead of, I should go to the party. And that, fellow perfectionists, is where we go beyond the grammatical meaning of should and right to the social power associated with the word. We hear an awful lot of messaging that uses the word should. You should look a certain way. You should act a certain way. You should exist as a person a certain way. You should make a certain amount of money. You should wield a certain amount of power. You should do so many things. The word should is weaponized by politicians. You should vote for me because I will do XYZ. And that makes me a good person, unlike that other candidate. The word should is weaponized by leaders in whatever sphere you choose, such as religious leaders or your boss. You should believe this specific religious teaching because it will make you a good person and lead to fulfillment after you die. The word should is weaponized by marketing teams the world over. You should buy this beauty product so that you have perfect skin, so that you'll be pretty and people will like you. And what happens is we each internalize the messaging that resonates most strongly with us, to the point that we may not even know it is there anymore. It might become so second nature to argue for or against something because of how things just should be. The word should is how we police our own behavior and the behavior of others in order to feel like we have some sort of control over our lives. And this makes sense and is perfectly human. After all, seeking answers and direction and meaning in life has been the definition of the human struggle since it began. And while using the word should may feel like it makes sense at the time, it has also been at the precipice of so many of our disagreements, wars, and discontent. Such and such civilization doesn't follow my religion, but they should because mine is best, and so we will go to war and take over. Such and such country should share their resources with me at a reasonable price, but they won't, which makes them the enemy, so we will go to war and fight for it. It's a story as old as archaeological records themselves, and older. And with the massive social implications of the word should come the personal attacks that we make on ourselves and how the word should makes us feel about ourselves. When was the last time that you told yourself that you should be doing something and you actually felt good about it? I can tell you with a fair amount of certainty that it has never happened to me. When I tell myself that I should do something, I am giving one single word power over my happiness. Because if I say I should do something, then I am telling myself that I am not good enough and that there is something about my person or my actions that I need to fix, no matter how small. At this point, you may be thinking to yourself, and I'll be honest, I am too, you may be thinking to yourself, but aren't there some things that we really should do? Who am I without any guiding principles? Some things are just objectively good or right. But are they though? I think the way that should is most damaging is that it so effortlessly convinces us that we have an objective truth, or at the very least the best truth, to move forward with. Whatever values you were raised with or acquired over time, you probably believe that you should try to live a life that aligns with those values. But does that make them the best? Does that make them right? Does that make them objective? It really doesn't, because every single thing that we say we should do is a contrived reason. It was made up by some human at some point in time, and just because a lot of people agree doesn't necessarily mean that every single human on the planet will. No one has the definitive guide. No one actually gets to say what you should or should not do because humans aren't omnipotent, and we don't have the universe's rule book. I say this because I honestly find it incredibly empowering. Believing that there actually isn't an answer, that there isn't an objective truth to find or a real right way of living, releases so much anxiety and pressure. Because if there isn't anything that I actually should do, then I just get to live my life in a way that feels real and authentic to me, without caring what other people think. Nobody gets to tell me what I should do. I get to make those choices for myself, which means I still definitely have some guiding principles, as we all do. But it also means that I don't need to get anyone's permission or validation for my principles. Because not every person in the world will always agree with me 100% of the time. So why not live in a way that feels right to me? To illustrate this, I want to briefly talk about one of the areas of my life where I have been most successfully releasing a lot of my perfectionistic ideals: body image. I plan to do a 10-episode series purely focused on body image, so have no fear, this is just an excerpt of the story. For almost as long as I can remember, I told myself a lot of things about how my body should be. I should be skinnier. I should lose weight. I should have thinner arms and more narrow shoulders. I should have a slimmer face. I should have a smaller nose. I should have more voluminous hair. I should have darker hair. I should have less ghostly skin. I should have less dry skin. I should have better nails. I should have more symmetrical feet. I should have larger breasts. I should have a smaller stomach. You get the idea. Did you hear all of those should messages? And that was only one small area of my life. And that wasn't even all of them. Side note, I highly recommend doing this exercise because you start to see really quickly just how much you use the word should, which simultaneously starts to illuminate just how harmful and overwhelming it actually can be. Anyway, I had a lot of messages about how my body should be and how I should look. Perfect girls were tall, thin, and pretty. Therefore, I should strive to be tall, thin, and pretty. But says who? Well, says society, and says media, and says advertising, and often to a disconcerting extent, says doctors. I'm not saying that the messaging isn't there because it absolutely is. And it isn't our fault that we received all of the messaging and that we internalized it until the voice of should be is so loud that we can't turn it off. It wasn't our fault. We can't shame or judge ourselves for it. What we can do is question it. Who says that there's anything wrong with being short, tall, or average height? Does it actually matter to the universe? If you walk through this world at a different eye level than any other person, does that mean that you have any more or less value? I don't think so. Who says there's anything wrong with being thin, fat, petite, plus size, mid-size, or anything else? Does the earth that you walk on give a flying hoot how much you weigh? Is there a rule book gifted from space that says that someone who weighs more or carries more fat on their bodies or who collects their body fat in certain places is inherently more or less worthy than anyone else? If we take all of the really harsh societal messaging out of the picture and we all lived in our own little bubbles, would how much your body ends up weighing make any sort of difference? I don't think so. Who says there's anything wrong with where your eyes are placed on your face, how much acne you have, what size or shape your nose is, what shape your cheekbones are, whether you have facial hair or not, how straight or crooked your teeth are, or what marks or scars you have? Did the universe objectively declare that someone with a small nose is more valuable than someone with a large one? Did the universe definitively state that cheekbones contoured to the high heavens are the most precious of cheekbones? I don't think so. And that's because not a single thing about how you look or how your body exists on Earth at this very moment is objectively right or wrong. There is actually no way that you should be. It sounds cliche to say something along the lines of, you're worthy just the way you are, but it's actually the most true thing I can say. Because you know what determines worth? What we each individually determine should be worthy. Aha, sneaky word that should. A sneaky auxiliary verb that pretends like it knows what is best for you, for me, for your loved ones, for your enemies, and people you've never even met and will never meet. A sneaky auxiliary verb that assigns judgment, hate, and invalidation on yourself and everyone else. Honestly, the word should really sucks. So let's talk about some words that we can use instead, because self-talk really is critically important. One gut reaction I sometimes have is to replace the word should with yet another auxiliary verb, and see if I can get away with still making myself feel horrible, because our brains are used to that and it's a really tricky pattern to unlearn. For example, instead of saying, "Oh, it's a beautiful day, I really should go on a walk," I might try, "Oh, it's a beautiful day, I could go on a walk." It's slightly better, I'll give it that, but there is still that undercurrent of judgment there. It's almost like the auxiliary verb itself implies a choice, Like should and could are leaving the moral judgment up to you, and then there's really no way you can win in that scenario. You either guilt yourself into doing something you clearly don't want to do because you use the auxiliary verb, or you don't do the thing, but you keep reminding yourself that you didn't do it, and then you just shame yourself for not doing it. So really replacing should with could may be an okay intermittent step, but I think there's an even better way. What if, instead of using auxiliary verbs, we just ditched them in the first place and took the conversation with ourselves deeper? Pay attention to your thoughts, and when you notice a should pop up, stop yourself. We can keep using my example. It's a beautiful day. I really should go on a walk. Stop yourself and remind yourself that nobody else gets to make choices for you. If you'd like, you can sit with this for a while and think about why you believe you should do the thing in the first place. With my example, I have a lot of underlying messaging and lies that tell me that being active daily is the only good way to live life, and that not seizing every opportunity to go outside when the weather is conducive is some form of either lazy or short-sighted. Okay, but says who? It's only my brain telling me that, and I get to make my own choices. So now it's time for the reframe. Ditch the auxiliary verb and try a verb that can stand on its own, like want, and see how it feels. See if you agree with your new sentence. When I say to myself, "It's a beautiful day. I really want to go on a walk," one of two things will happen, often depending on the day. One, that sentence may sound really good, and I may immediately feel confident and happy. Because yes, I do enjoy nice walks outside, and there are absolutely some days where I am completely down to go on a walk. And then I can go on the walk, but only because I confirmed with myself that I actually wanted to do it today, and not because some inner critic in my head told me I had to. I'll enjoy the walk more knowing that I'm doing it for me and for no one else. The other thing that could happen is that the sentence will sound really disingenuous, and then you will know for sure that you don't actually want to do it. You may feel anxious or uneasy or guilty, all signs that you are not doing the thing for the right reason. There are some days where I am exhausted, and all I want to do is rest on the couch, or some days where I haven't gotten to enjoy my passion for video gaming in a while, and I want to prioritize that first. And so maybe I don't actually want to go on a walk that day. And now I know. There are other words that work besides just want. Sometimes you can take out the complexity of the sentence altogether and see how that works. I am walking today is very clear, almost a demand. And if you're anything like me, demands for things that you don't want to do really don't sit well, which means you can elicit a strong emotion and know for sure that you do or do not want to do the thing. All in all, it's a process. When you pay attention to your thoughts, I have a sneaking suspicion that you will find an awful lot of shoulds rattling around in your brain. And again, it's normal. They are there for a reason, usually to protect you and make you feel safe by presenting that veneer of control. But they don't need to be there. If you want them to stay, then that's your choice too. But that's the whole point of this episode. I think it's about time that we felt empowered to make our own choices in life. The time for bowing down to an awful lot of rules that most of us never asked for and that are not bringing us any happiness is over. The time for checking in with yourself, knowing what you want, and understanding that you are worthy just as you are because no human gets to write the rule book, that time is now. I opened today's episode with a quote attributed to Abhadev from The Influencer, "Speed must have a limit." The cause of our despair is the sentences at the back of our minds, all of which contain the word should. The word should creates an awful lot of despair, but it doesn't have to. Guilt and shame almost never work or lead to a happy life. I think there's a better way. Thank you for listening today, fellow perfectionists. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please feel free to like, comment, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more perfectionism-related content and to help the channel grow. If these episodes are resonating with you and you think they might resonate with others, please feel free to share it as well. Until next time, fellow perfectionists.